My name is Bobby Carlisle,
And what is your date of birth?
March the 28th, 1941.
And where were you born?
I was born in Prairie Grove at Mott Clinic.
And this interview is for the Farmington Oral History Project, and we just want to be sure that we have your permission to reuse this interview.
Yes, you do have my permission to do the interview.
Thank you, Bobby. Who were your parents?
Jewel Whitmire Carlisle, and Leonard Carlisle. They call him Curly.
Tell me about your family, your siblings.
I have a daughter and a son. I have three. See, how many kids do I have now? 6, 7. I have one great-granddaughter. Have 6 grandchildren. 3 girls, 3 boys.
Tell me about your brothers and sisters.
My brother is Randall Carlisle, and when he went into the service, and I believe it was 1956, he was stationed in Michigan, and he just never left. He's still there, and he worked for General Motors for about 30 years and then retired.
Tell me about your father and your family's business. What line of work was he in?
Well, he was an electrician and traveled several different states in order to find jobs. And my mother just was a housewife. She worked for the widow's grocery store for a while, and then she became a practical nurse and retired from the VA hospital.
Did you help in your family's business, your dad's electrician work?
No, they had DNC Electric. I think it's still going, but it's not anything. It was Doyle and Curly's, I believe, at the time. And I was around, but I didn't really help any. But unfortunately, I turned out to be an electrician.
Tell me, what were some of the jobs you worked whenever you were a kid?
I spent a lot of time with Hobo Hickman. Hobo was I guess he would be the area manager for Stark Brothers Nursery. And I picked pruned grapes, picked cherries, and we picked cherries kind of different. We spread big tarps out underneath these big trees. We'd take long poles and beat them, and all the little seed cherries is what they were. And they'd fall down on the tarp, and we'd bring them back to where part of the school is right now on the corner of Double Springs and I can't think of the road, but we'd put them in a big vat of water. It'd float all the leaves and sticks, and then we'd scrape them all off, put them on squares with hardware cloth or little, I guess it'd be 1/4-inch hole screen. And then we'd sit there and rub all the cherries out, and there was all the seeds out, and there was an old house there, and we'd take the seeds and throw them in there and let them dry, and then send them to Stark Brothers in Missouri.
What else did you do for Starks? About what year was that, and what did you do?
Well, it was all my senior years. I mean, all my 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, we'd work during the summertime. Sometimes in the winter when we was off, it'd be pruning grapes. We did about everything for Hobo to do with the grapes, the cherry business. The cherries, the seeds, they'd plant the seeds, and then they would graft apples or cherries or whatever they wanted to those seeds, because of the root system that it had was much better than the original trees, so they'd graft them on. They taught us how to graft, and I guess that would be about it. Just mostly during the summertime after I graduated, went to school. And
What year did you graduate from Farmington?
1959, May of 1959.
So you were working for Starks in the 50s?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Tell me about your family routines. What did y'all do at home? What were some of the things y'all did at home as a family when you were a kid?
Mainly, summertime we'd haul hay. At home we didn't do much other than play with the dogs. We tried to get out, and at the time our main fun was getting a couple of old oil cans and stomping on them and walking on the oil cans. We'd had an old metal hoop and a little face at the bottom, and we'd roll the hoop up and down the streets, and had some really nice toys. But home, we just, I guess like everybody else at the time, was poor and didn't know it.
Tell me about your earliest memories of Farmington.
Gosh, earliest I remember we'll be playing on the creek down underneath the bridge. We hunt crawdads. Right behind the Rika White's store, there was a little puddle there. It's water about maybe knee deep. That was our swimming pool. But home, we just all the kids get together and we just run.
Did you live in Farmington the whole time when you were growing up?
Yes, sir. I lived in Farmington the entire life, 40 years.
Tell me about the stores and businesses, the farthest ones back you can remember, and let's talk about some of them.
I guess J.D. Phillips was beside the Baptist church. The other stores would be McNeil's grocery store, and the other one would be Rika White's grocery store.
Tell me a little bit about each one of them. Who ran them and what were they like?
J.D. Phillips was a Exxon service station, grocery store, sort of like a 7-Eleven. J.D. he was kind of hard to get to know, but we spent a lot of time aggravating him, I guess, as kids. We'd try to find something to aggravate, and Miss Sue McNeil, she'd kind of like our mother, I guess. When we worked for Stark Brothers Nursery, I don't think we ever saw a check. Hobo would just bring the checks down to Miss McNeil, and we'd sign the back of it, and if we had anything coming, well, she'd give it to us, and if we owed her more, we'd try to catch it up on the next payday. And Rika White she knew everything in town. She was a local newspaper, and she'd keep us posted, or she'd keep everybody posted what we was doing and who was doing it. And I'd sit down there on the mornings and watch the bread man come in. He'd leave his bread in a little bread box outside, and sometimes I would come to Prairie Grove, Cane Hill, really. My grandparents lived out there, and I'd catch a bus there and ride out to Cane Hill, and they'd drop me off. And then they had the post office, which across the street was Russell Brawls. Russell and I became real good friends. In his later age, I drove a lot, and we'd go to different Masonic organizations around in Little Rock or wherever he wanted to go. I'd take him, and he thrived himself on telling tales on me. He said I'd go down at night and tie his flagpole rope up in the top of the pole, and then he'd give me a quarter in the morning to climb that pole and get his flag rope back down. And I never could convince him it really wasn't me. It was Stanley that did that. But I said, I can't take your quarter, Russell. He said, yeah, you can. Yeah, it's okay. So Russell and I was really good friends. He was quite a man.
Tell me more about Russell Brawls.
Russell was the post office, him and Clara, and we used to just go up and sit down on, and talk to them, just, like this one of our family, and they knew our family, so it's pretty easy talking. But Russell was in the Masonic organization, and they're in Farmington, and Scottish Rites in Fort Smith, and Shriners in Little Rock. And I became a Mason, and then I went into the Scottish Rites, and then I went on into the Shriners. But he and I had a lot of fun together, just traveling around, and listening to him tell stories was kind of nice, really.
Do you remember any of the stories he used to tell? Can you give secondhand accounts of those stories?
Well, I really don't remember that many of them. That's been a lot of years ago. I just remember that back then they all had names, nicknames, and I remember his, they called him Thin Oil, and that's because he didn't have much hair, so it didn't take much hair oil for him. And Thornton Buchanan was Buck, and I'm not sure about the others that are around, but they used to all gather on Sundays and play baseball up at the school, and they draw pretty good crowds. It's about all we had to do at the time.
Tell me more about those games they used to play.
Well, there's different towns would get together and would play different towns every week, and sometimes it'd be here and sometimes it'd be away, but they'd played Huntsville and St. Paul and all the towns out around in the area. Kids, the guys they were grown men, they'd all grow up and gather around and start playing baseball. And we'd sit around and watch them. Sometimes, I think a little moonshine got kind of mixed up in there, but because sometimes I'm not sure if they knew the ball was coming or not, but it still was a lot of fun. Farmington is a good town to have grown up in. All of them, all the small towns are good to grow up in.
Tell me about what the school was like when you were growing up, as far back as you can remember, and then kind of walk through your memories of school.
Well, I can remember just about all of them from the first grade was Miss Brown. And come on up there, I think Mr. Stamps was the 6th grade when I was in the 6th grade. And Coker is when I got into high school. He was I think he's right around 7 foot tall. And all the teachers were really nice. Mac Hamlin was a math teacher or something. He's one of the guys you didn't really mess with because he had been in the Marines and come out and was teaching school, and they always tried to get on him, the seniors, they'd say, well, let's just take you outside. He said, I'll take you all out there, and none of you going to come back in here without a limp. But Mac was a nice guy. You didn't back talk him. Miss Romans, she was a nice teacher. She taught my mother, and then she taught me and my brother. And oh gosh, I don't know. It was a good year.
Who were some of your high school friends, your friends and classmates?
Classmates were probably Larry Doster. He has since passed away. Gene Woods, Jimmy Carney. Classmates, there wasn't a lot of them. I think in my class there was only 13 of us. And I started out more than that, but we only went through the senior years at 13. There was 7 boys or 7 girls and 6 boys. And David Cox, he was a good friend. He actually taught us math in school. He knew math forwards and backwards, everything. He knew more than the teachers did, and and they actually hired him to teach math sometimes. And that's pretty well it, the ones that lived, because the rest of everybody else lived kind of out in I guess, Savoy, out around that area after we consolidated with them.
Tell me about the sports. What kind of sports did you have when you were
We
in
had
school?
basketball, where there wasn't not enough. They only had 5 that played basketball. And we'd go to play different games, Winslow and around. A lot of times we'd have to borrow, if somebody found out, we'd have to borrow one of the guys from the other town to go ahead and play. But it was nice. I enjoyed it. You know, I don't think I enjoyed it as much then as I do now. Just reflecting back on small towns. You know, we could leave our doors unlocked, you could leave your cars unlocked, you could leave your toys out in the yard. You could walk up and down the highway. One of the things we did just for fun, we'd hitchhike a ride. And we'd be sitting down on McNeil's grocery store on the concrete out there, and if a car, it didn't matter which way the car was going, we'd jump up and run out there and hitchhike. And they'd get us a ride, and we'd go to Fayetteville, and we'd turn around and hitchhike back to Farmington, or if it was going to Prairie Grove, we'd hitchhike to Prairie Grove, and then sometimes we'd walk back, but there just wasn't a lot of cars. But now, you don't do that now.
So what about football? Tell me about
Football, we didn't have enough people to play football, so we never played. We played baseball. The smaller schools, you know. Baseball is one thing I really can't remember that much about, but I run into different people that said, yeah, you know, you used to do this, you used to do that. I said, well, I don't remember. I remember playing center field, but that's about all I ever remembered about baseball.
Did your family go to church anywhere there in Farmington? And
Yeah,
if you did, tell me about that.
We were brought up in the Baptist, and it's pretty well about where it was when I grew up now. I guess after I got married, my wife was a Methodist, so they switched me to Methodist pretty quick.
You mentioned this a little bit earlier, but tell me more. What did the kids do for fun back in the day when you were a kid?
Well, we'd find a little creek, and if it had enough water in it to hold water, we'd try to swim in it. We'd walk up and down the creeks. We'd fish a little, catch a few perch. We used to call, I guess they still call it noodle, where you'd get in the water and you'd put your hands in under there and you'd walk around and try to find a hole in the back of the creeks and stuff and see if there's any fish in there. And surprisingly, we had pretty good luck at doing that, better than we did with the pole. We did a little bit of roller skating. Gosh, I did some. Well, the bicycles, we had, I think it was Kenneth Shelley, had built a two-story bicycle. And between the Widow's grocery store and McNeil's, there used to be an old set of scales that the wagons and stuff had run across and weigh. There was a tree there. We'd had to climb that tree to get on the bicycle. And when we got off, it usually ended up with a Band-Aid. That just, you know, we didn't have any money. There wasn't nothing to do if you had any money. So we just, kind of like that TV program, we made do with what we had and got by on less, I guess.
What did your parents and the other adults do for fun back when you were a kid?
I don't remember. Well, it's just homebodies, you know. We didn't have TV for a lot of years until I probably got 10 or 11 years old, something like that. had an old Philco, and it was a round screen. Channel 5 out of Fort Smith, we could, if you looked real close, you could almost see a picture. There's just a lot of white snow. And then Joplin came on the line, and with one of the rotaries on the antennas, we were able to pick up Joplin. But and we watched TV a lot then. But and, you know, it's just there wasn't a lot to do. We didn't have cars. I just we were just around town, walk around town, go to the woods, camp out a lot. We did a lot of camping out. Had the Boy Scouts, and we got into that. And we was pretty active in the Boy Scouts.
Tell me what you did after you got out of high school and before you got into city government.
Well, I got out of high school. Went to Spartan School of Aeronautics in Tulsa, and joined the service, and spent most of my time in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And from Lake Charles, when they closed that base down, they sent me to K.I. Sawyer in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, and we got there in September. I was married, snowing, and I couldn't figure out what a southern boy was doing in a place like that. He had no business being there. But after I got out of that, I went back to school, to electrical school, and just kind of traveled around the United States like my father did, trying to make a living. I guess that's kind of when I got a lot into government, because everywhere we go, we had to go into the city halls and take tests and all that in order to work in the towns. So I came back and kind of got into that and wondered why we didn't have a lot of things in Farmington that other people had. And I said, well, let me see if I can't do something for that. So I ran for mayor and was elected, and we started building Farmington. And we worked hard at it. A lot of people didn't appreciate it, a lot of people did. We accomplished a lot in Farmington.
Tell me what year it was when you started, and then tell me what the city was like when you were mayor. Tell me about the city.
I was elected mayor in 1969, I guess, and started in 1970. There was not a lot in Farmington. I decided, well, what do we need? Let's see what we need. Jerry Shannon was on the council. He and I was good friends. We talked things over, decided what we needed to do, and we set in to do them. First thing we wanted to do was get a fire department. I said, okay, I'll buy a fire truck. So I got a chance to buy a new fire truck, and I bought it, and everybody wanted to have an election, and they voted it down. They didn't want a fire department. So I said, okay, then I'll sell it, and maybe we could rent a fire department out as a hay barn or something. Of course, my wife told me not to say all that stuff, but that's what happened. And then they decided, well, maybe we ought to have another election. So we had another election, and it passed then, which meant savings in dollars for them, on their insurance. And we got a lot of people. Appointed Bill Andrews as fire chief, and Bill did a fantastic job on training and getting people interested. He was a member of the federal fire department, or I guess part-time or something like that. If the phone rang, then they all, kind of like we did here, we went out. Then I kind of made a list of what all we started out at there. One of the things that I really saw in these other towns was older people. You know, my thing was, I need to do something for older people. So I talked Carolyn into doing the elderly nutrition program. And she finally agreed, so we'd pick up the meals, or she'd pick up the meals, and she delivered them. I think we had about 45 that she delivered to. And we did this every day, I guess until I left. That was one of the main things. The other thing that I really wanted to do, I liked, was a sewer system. So at the time, Bill Clinton was in office, and Russell and I went down to talk to Bill, and he said, okay, we'll see what we can do in the soil and bank. And we applied for a loan. So he gave us a grant to do the sewer system. So there was no taxes involved in it. It was free. We told the people, if you don't have the money to hook up to the sewer system, we'll hook you up. It won't cost you anything. Otherwise, I think it was $45 to hook up. And at that time, $45 was a lot of money. And we got everybody in town hooked up on it. And then we said, well, what do we need to do now? So we did, did a lot of things. We named the streets that weren't named already. We put up the street signs. We paved all the streets. So we needed a sanitation department, so I bought a truck for the sanitation department, started it up. Some didn't like it and some did, but everybody got used to it, and they liked it. Then we took the one thing I guess I caught a little flack over, out where where all the growth is, where the Casey's and all that group of post office and all that doing. Well, I ran a 6-inch water line from there to 170 out in the middle of a cow pasture. Well, why are we putting it out there? I said, well, that's future growth. That's one way we can go. And again, I get that with a grant, and there was no taxes involved in doing that. No raise in the water. We numbered all the houses in the town. We started a police department. Some liked it and some didn't. We built a dog pound. We started a festival, which most everybody liked it, where we had a big to-do, and then on the 4th of July we'd have a big fireworks, and it was really nice. Had a lot of people come out, had entertainers to come out. Mickey Getty was out, Johnny Russell, Christy Lane, the Southern gentleman. I can't even think of his name now. But that was pretty good. That took a lot of work. And KFAY, the radio station, was Pat Demery owned it, and he was really a big help. Pat, I'd go to him sometimes and get a little knowledge from him, and he was a big help to the city of Farmington. Sponsorship or whatever we needed. We did the sanitation department. Gosh, I don't know. We just, about everything you see, we started it out, I guess. Sewer, water, police. Gosh, I'm not sure. Even your dad had a hand in it. I talked to him a lot, being a newspaper attorney and everything. My boss and I talked several times.
Tell me more about the festival. What year did that start? And then just tell me a little bit of the details about it. And what did y'all call it?
Well, it started out as a bicentennial. I applied for a grant. We got a small grant to do that, and we had a lot of help. We had the chickens that was actually donated, and we barbecued chicken and rice or beans and potato salad and stuff. We did it on what's now the baseball field. We built the baseball field and the concession stand. A lot of it was all donation. We didn't have any, again, there was no tax money or city money involved in it. City didn't have that much money anyway. But the festival was really something that kind of brought everybody together, and everybody seemed to enjoy it, so we continued it. But I don't believe they do it now, but it's something then that was small enough that we could do it and manage it. They do a big fireworks now, so that part was carried on. I can't think of much else on the festival other than the barbecue and get together and entertainment. And,
What was the name of it?
just a Farmington's festival, annual festival.
I know that in those days the city was small when you were
Right.
there, and
Right.
you were starting a lot of things on grant money. How tight was the money? Talk about how tight of a budget you had to work with.
Well, we had a sales tax, I guess. It would have probably amounted to, I don't know, maybe $3,000 or $4,000 or something. We had very little money. Everybody thought the city was wealthy, but we weren't. A lot of it was donated. When we put the sewer system in, Smitty, he was a plumber, he came in and did a bang-up job for doing all the installation on the sewer. And like I say, if they didn't have the money, we'd just tell them to hook them up for nothing, because they don't have any money. And well, I think if a phone call cost a dime, we usually had about 9 cents. And it was kind of a funny deal with a phone in that you could call, in Farmington, we could call Fayetteville, just pick up the phone and dial the number. But to call Prairie Grove is a long distance. And we never could figure that one out, but it helped, like Russell, Pat Demery, and some that I can't think now, and I wish I could. They knew the doors to knock on, I'll put it that way. And when they knocked, we usually got something, whatever it was we was looking for. We usually got it for very little or nothing. They just donated. And that's what Cafe Y did. They just donated to us.
One other event that's besides the festival that you started, that was always been a real big thing in Farmington, has been the annual Fireman's Breakfast.
Yeah, right.
And do you remember when it started and why they started it?
No, we had some when I was there, but no, it wasn't anything like they have now. I mean, it was a good thing then, and all the money that was ever raised went right back into equipment with the fire department. We had kind of an agreement with Prairie Grove. They had the big fire department, the water trucks, and all of this, and so we had an agreement with them that they'd come and help, and they did. They were fantastic. Farmington had a fantastic bunch of people that were really dedicated. The only thing that I really had second thoughts about is our training is they set a propane tank on fire and we had to put it out. And none of us was looking forward to that because we knew what propane and fire was. But it wasn't, I guess it was natural gas, is what they had hooked it up, but it's on a propane tank until they showed us how to do it. And after they showed us how to do it, it's a piece of cake. So they just take the water, blow the fire back, and when you get the fire back, hold your water on, reach over and turn it off. Oh, that's simple, but your mind and your adrenaline doesn't work like that when you're out there. So the guys in the Farmington Fire Department have really come a long way. They've done a fantastic job. Mr. Cunningham, he was a little kid when he started, but he's done a nice job up there. Bill did a good job.
Tell me about some of the others on the fire department back in the day that stayed with it for a long time.
Well, I guess, and there again, I remember faces, but I don't remember names. Bill, of course, he was the chief. Jerry Shannon, Mark Cunningham, C.D. Pike was on there. Gosh, that's the one thing about growing old. You don't remember a lot. Tomorrow I'll remember everything.
What all do you remember about the growth of Farmington? Because when you were mayor, there wasn't much of a town, and then you started putting in water lines and stuff.
Yeah.
Tell me about how the growth kind of took off and what you remember of it.
Well, the first thing we really did, we sat down and did a growth area. And we decided, okay, the city council and the growth people, I think Margaret Banton was one of them. Margaret I think she might have worked for Boyce at one time. She was a kind of a news reporter and all this, but anyway, we got several of the leading people around, Russell and them, and we decided, which way did we want to grow? How were we going to grow? What do we need to do? Well, first thing we need a sewer system, and then we needed water. So that's the first things we went after, and it was still kind of stalemate. We were just a bedroom community, and I guess when I left, it was still just considered kind of like a bedroom. It was starting to expand. Housing was starting to come along, but nothing like the growth that's happened in the last, of course, 40 years makes a long time. Makes a lot of growth, and we were the only way Fayetteville would come. We had an agreement with them on the sewer system. They bumped it back to Fayetteville, and they still do, I guess. Cars were very, very few. In the 50s, there weren't a lot of cars. The cars were in the 50s, they're restored now. And the other day, I talked to a couple of guys who was restoring one, and I said, I finally figured out why us older guys take old cars to restore. I said, why not? I said, because we don't understand computers and all that thing that's on all these cars now. Before, you had 4, 6, or 8 spark plugs and change plugs or timing belt or something, anybody could do that. But now it's a lot more complicated. That's sort of like the city. It was easy, a lot of work when I was there, but now it's really complicated with all the laws and stuff that they have to go through. And
do you remember what year they paved the highway through town, and when it went from 2-lane to 4-lane and that kind of stuff?
No, I spent I think 3 trips to Little Rock trying to get them to put a 4-lane in, and it was always on the calendar, but we don't have the money. That was the story that we always got. I don't remember exactly what year it was. I was not here. I was in Texas when it went to a 4-lane. So.
What about paving it? What year was it paved in?
I'm going to say it was probably in the mid 50s. They had a lot of gravel, white gravel and stuff, and kind of like a chip in the oil. Didn't last long, one summer, 2 summers. But none of the streets in town were paved. That we took care of that. We paved all of them.
Is there anything else you can think of maybe that I haven't thought to ask about?
If you asked me tomorrow, I could probably tell you. But I don't know. I just think everybody ought to get involved in politics. It's something that, we sit around in little groups and we cut this down, we cut that down. I think it wanted to be kind of sarcastic or overbearing or something. We had a few people at a city council meeting one night that was, I think it was over dogs or something. And that's the first time they had been to the city council meeting. I told them, I said, well, I'm going to tell you, it's just like this. I said, if you don't get involved in city business, then I'm going to tell you what to eat, where to eat, when to eat, and how to eat. You get involved in city government, and then you tell us what you want. And then we'll do it that way. So and that holds true today. If you don't vote, you don't get out and get involved in these committees. They got lots of committees going now. If they don't get out and get involved in them, they got nobody to complain. Yeah, it's like a family. That's all a town is. It's a family. And I kind of think it was Oliver Wendell Holmes that said, taxation is a price you pay for civilization. Decide how civilized you want to be and tax yourselves accordingly. And I'm not sure that's what he said, but I'll give him credit for it. But I think that's on one of those big buildings in Washington, D.C.
If you had to tell someone who'd never been to Farmington what it was like in Farmington, what your hometown of Farmington was like, what would you tell them?
It's wonderful. Nice place to roll. Farmington is a good place. The school system is outstanding. The people, most of the ones that I have met now, are outstanding people. It's a place you can still get out of McDonald's and leave your car unlocked. And you can't do that in any bigger city. I'm not sure you can do that in Fayetteville. But it's a nice place to grow up. A small town is a nice place to grow up. You know people, you know what they need, you know how to help. It's just a nice place to grow up.
If I ask you to complete this sentence in a full sentence, my favorite thing about Farmington is?
My favorite thing about Farmington is the memories. They're good memories. It's a nice place to live.